All hail the popcorn king. Welcome to the Film Threat Podcast. I am Chris Gore. It's time we talk about this Joe Lansdale documentary, All Hail the Popcorn King. I am pleased to have on the Film Threat Podcast today, Hansi Oppenheimer. Thank you for being on the show, Hansi. It's great to meet you.
We have met before.
Where did we meet?
We met at at Kathleen David's brother's party at Decon with Patty Hawkins.
Oh, wow, that's right. Oh my God. I love Patty Hawkins. Oh my God. Yes, I meet a lot of people at conventions. Yes. Decon is well, you're referring to Dragon Con.
Yeah.
Yes, Dragon Con Decon is also Designer Con, but Dragon Con is, that is like, it's, canceled. Everything's canceled this year, right? Yeah. Which means it's a good time to catch up on movies. But that's cool. That's I'm sure if it was Dragon Con, I promise you, I was probably carrying one of those buckets filled with rum that they sell in the hotel. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah. Absolutely. I've had those.
Yeah, exactly. All right. Well, apologies to our audience if you're watching this or listening to this. This is our private conversation before we actually talk about this. All Hail the Popcorn King, which is an appropriate title for the author Joe Lansdale, who wrote the short story that was used to make Bubba Ho-Tep, which is one of the coolest movies ever, directed by Don Coscarelli, who also wrote the screenplay. But, and I knew anyone you talk to who's a Joe Lansdale fan of his fiction, it's like they're telling you about a type of barbecue sauce that you didn't know about, and you need to know about Joe Lansdale. And I knew him from that. I didn't realize until I watched your documentary, how prolific he was in terms of the amount that he has written, what a profound effect he's had on everybody who's read his work. I assume you know him and gained his trust because you not only talk to him, you talk to every member of his family. How did this project come about?
Well, I was working on another project about Joe Bob Briggs, and I asked Joe, we were friends on Twitter, if he would contribute a video, and he said, I can't do that, but I'll write you something. And he wrote this piece that's in the Joe Bob Briggs doc, and it's just classic Joe. And he got it back to me in 24 hours. It was perfect. It was wonderful. And I'm like, okay, next doc's about you, And then with Joe Bob, he didn't want to be involved at all. But Joe was like, cool, okay, so, and started making suggestions and saying, talk to this person, or here, let me introduce you to this person. I offered him executive producer credit, but he's like, yeah, no, it's your film, So I just said in cooperation with Joe Lansdale. But the whole family is awesome. They are just the loveliest people.
Yeah, it's for those that don't know about the movie Bubba Ho-Tep, and from whence it came, a short story. It's about Bruce Campbell plays Elvis, who faked his own death so he could live a normal life. So he faked his own death way back in the day, and then is in a retirement home. And he befriends a black gentleman who claims to be JFK, and there are mummies in it. Let's not beat around the bush here. It's basically Elvis versus the mummies, yeah. But it's Elvis set in present day because he faked his own death, and it's remarkably creative. It's fun. It has really poignant moments as well that are heartbreaking. I'm assuming that it really reflects Joe Lansdale's work.
Oh, absolutely. And he even said to Don Coscarelli, I don't think we can make a movie out of this. And Don Coscarelli did the script, and he did it he sent it to Joe, and Joe's like, well, God damn it. You nailed it.
Well, I think it's respecting the source material, because from what I gleaned from, I have not read any of Joe Lansdale's work. However, right after seeing your documentary, I pulled up audible.com to see. I'm an Audible fan. What can I say? I'm I used to be well read. Now I'm well listened.
Chet Williams and did a really great audiobook of The Magic Wagon.
Oh, wow.
And he does it. He gets the voice, the East Texas voice.
Well, I was going to ask you for some recommendations because I love Audible just because I spend too much time looking at screens. Like I'm looking right now. I'm always looking at a screen. I'm either doing work for, doing film threat related work or working on a film project of my own, or I'm watching a movie for work. So to me, just to put my face into a book is just like, I love to listen to books.
Yeah, there's quite a few of his that have been that are on Audible or whatever download platform you use. But yeah, there's definitely a bunch of them.
Well, Stephen King famously puts out a list every year. You should look this up on his blog. He publishes a list of the best audiobooks, and he bases it on two factors. One, the work itself, of course, and then the second factor is who reads it and the performances. And some of the books, I actually reread Dune recently by Frank Herbert, the original from 1965. And they actually it came out in the early 2000s, and they added so after the David Lynch film, they added some music, and they hired actors to do performances of the different characters. It's really well done. So I have to get your audiobook recommendation for Joe Lansdale because I want to go down that rabbit hole. The problem I had is there were so many audiobooks of his work. I didn't even know where to start. Where would you suggest that I start with Joe?
I would The Magic Wagon and The Drive-In.
Yes. Okay. I looked for that one because the story of The Drive-In, I don't know much about it, but as described in your documentary, I have to say, because first of all, I'm a huge fan of The Drive-In. Since the lockdown, I've been going to The Drive-In every week.
Oh, awesome.
I love it. I don't know. I'm just whatever.
I'm totally with you. The Drive-In,
It's also a big thing in Texas. I know drive-ins are big. There's like 3 near me, but the story of The Drive-In is people that become trapped at a drive-in. And I don't know that would be a bad thing for me. Actually, I think I would enjoy that.
The problem is Barbary soon ensues, and everyone goes crazy, and turn into cannibals, and the guy who's the one guy and his friend who are the biggest bullies get fused together as one person. So they put a popcorn bucket on their head, and they're now the king of the drive-in. Which is why there's pictures of us at one screening in LA where I made everyone popcorn bucket hats. I made Joe's like a fez.
Well, I know that the Lansdale family is a fan of doing screenings with their own special popcorn. I heard that story. That was quite interesting. It's interesting that Joe Lansdale, everyone that he encountered, has like a story about knowing him. That how did you go about collecting all of these stories from the people in the documentary?
Well, a lot of times I just work out of fandom, so I reach out to the fans first, and then as we progressed, we started to get bigger names interested. And, Joe helped a lot with that, like Bruce Campbell and James Purfoy, reaching out to them and saying, are you interested? I already knew Mick Garris, so we did that one. Dal Howison, I know. So, he was cool with doing that. The horror community is actually like a pretty supportive community.
That's what I love about the horror community. I go, when I say I did I'm saying I used to do before the world went mad, kind of like we're in our own drive-in that we're trapped in, right? On lockdown, quarantine, whatever we're calling this, the 2020 dumpster fire. Also just I have to say I'm a Bruce Campbell fan. Like from way back, like I always see him at this convention. I was about to mention Monster Palooza. They do this convention in Burbank and Pasadena called Monster Palooza and Son of Monster Palooza. And the one thing I know about horror fans is they are the most supportive community. And I know this because there are so many, I'm going to say, not perfect horror films that have their own fandom.
Oh, yeah.
You know, like movies that are not the greatest, but they have people that are super fans of those films. And that's what I always love about, I'll see Bruce Campbell at Monster Palooza. You see Tom Savini there. You see, it's the one thing the thing I love most about the horror community is everyone supports each other and there's no sense of elitism. Whereas in certain other communities, I'm not gonna say the things. I'm not gonna say things like Sundance, but there's
there's a fandom that's like, oh, I knew about it. There's gatekeeping and all that stuff that goes on.
Right.
The horror community seems to be less that way.
Yeah, there's not any of those barriers. So I must have been. I don't want to say it was easy, but I say when you're someone that's so beloved like Joe and his work, when you're approaching people to be in a documentary about it, has to be. I mean, the ask is, I love him. I have things to say, and from there.
I mean, I got to talk to all these really cool people. I got to tell you, Bruce was a little intimidating, but only because I've loved him for forever, like since the 80s, I guess. And I've met him a couple times, and he's always like so sarcastic.
Well, that's what he's
brilliant at it. Yeah.
He's basically the character that he played in the Sam Raimi Spider-Man movies. That's just Bruce Campbell. That's him being a jackass and a smartass, and that's what I love. We grew up in the same area of Michigan, and a little older than me, but I remember being like in high school and just revering, Sam Raimi and Bruce Campbell. It was like, I mean, they're legends. That's when the first Evil Dead came out, is like growing up in Michigan and loving these guys they had offices in Ferndale. I was in Royal Oak. It was just kind of crazy back in the day. I'm sorry if I'm going down kind of a memory lane rabbit hole with you here, but it's watching the movie. I love like your passion for it, the passion for the subject matter. And clearly everyone is passionate about Joe's work. And you don't have to twist my arm. I'm going to start with the drive-in. Aren't there two drive-in books?
There's actually a collection of 3. If you want, I can send it to you if you want to do hardcover. If not, I'll look online and see if I can find an Audible.
Well, if there's an Audible, I'm just going to buy it because I have an Audible account where I try to listen to a book a week, and it's usually I sort of switch. I'll do like biography, and then I'll do like a nonfiction and then a fiction, and I kind of like ping pong them. That's I don't know. That's just my thing, and I'm always doing it to do like weird projects around my place. Right? If I have to alphabetize DVDs, I'll be listening to a book while I'm doing it. But how now the process of putting this doc together, because I love talking to doc filmmakers. I mean, before we started recording this, we were talking about how, if you're a doc filmmaker, you're not going to be making a lot of money, right? It's just, that's just the, that just comes with being a doc filmmaker, is like doing community service,
I make films that I enjoy making. So, I think indie cult films are the best.
Well, I agree.
My money back and maybe a couple of grand more than that. And, I'm not asking, for $750,000, that doesn't make any sense. But I want to get the word out. I want to get the film out. And people, a lot of the reviews, if they didn't know Joe, by the end of the review, they're saying, now I have to go find this book or that book.
That's how I felt right after as your credits were running, I'm on my computer looking on Audible, and there were just so many. I was a little, it was a little daunting for me.
He's even read like half his catalog. I mean, he gave me, every time I see him, he gives me like a pile of books, and I'm like,
but it just reminded me of sort of an extension. I read a book years ago by Stephen King, and it's a great book. I recommend this to anyone aspiring to be a writer of any kind, nonfiction, fiction, screenwriting, whatever. Get Stephen King's book On Writing.
I read that.
that is a great book about, I mean, he tells stories from when he was a kid, sending in letters and trying to get jobs as a writer. I mean, he's like 14-year-old Stephen King, typing away. That's a great book. And for some reason, when I'm watching your documentary, I thought of that book on writing, because some of the stuff that Joe Lansdale, not only does he talk about, the stories, and in the documentary you explore him as a person, but he talks about his process and how he developed as a writer, and how it was really important to have the support of his wife those lean years and getting to develop his craft so that he could be a writer full time. I really think that I believe that the goal of every artist should be to make a living doing your art. Like that's, it doesn't, true artists that I know, it's not about being rich. It's about like, can I just do this as my job? Can this just be my job? Doing this art thing, whatever this is, writing, video, docs, film, whatever.
Writing when he was like 4. I mean, he was really a prodigy, but Karen was smart and loved him enough to be like, you stay home and write, and I better see 3 to 5 pages when I get home, and I'll go work, and they're still together. They're still madly in love. Like, it's adorable. The kids are really nice. They're really decent people who make great art.
Well, it's interesting to see like him being, he's also very self-effacing in the doc too.
He is really.
He's very brutally honest about like where he failed. And what did he say? He saved 1,000 rejection letters. Is that right? Like
plastered on the wall.
Wow. That.
Yeah. I don't think anyone, between his discipline of martial arts and everything, I don't think Joe is stoppable.
Well, that was that thing that really surprised me, because you see this video of him doing like martial arts at some convention or something. And I was just like, oh, whoa, those are good tips. I'm not a martial arts person. Wouldn't surprise you that physical activity is not a big part of my daily schedule. But yeah, I was really impressed with that. Now the documentary, you've completed it. You're sort of leaking it out, and I do appreciate you just approaching me, because we've had email exchanges in the past about your other projects, and it's interesting. This is not quite, it's not out in commercial release yet, but it's coming. How have people reacted to the film when they've seen it?
Really well. Yeah, I mean, every screening we sold out. We screened it at Nacogdoches Film Festival, George R. R. Martin's theater. He invited us to screen it there. And then we did 3 4 walls. And I mean, they were all sold out. Although the 4 walls were really exhausting. I really need a crew for that. That was a lot of work.
Yeah, it's the whole process of 4-walling a movie, which is basically where you rent the theater and then promote it and do your own screening. I've done that before. That's work. I did. For an indie film I produced years ago, we opened in 10 cities. That it's exhausting. It's exhausting. So yeah, I mean, it's nice to be able to. This is the thing. It's nice to be able to just hand it off to someone and get a check. But that's not the reality.
And it's also like after every single screening, we would make notes like what worked, so we tweaked it after every screening. And of course, Joe was always there to be like, well, this should be a little longer. And I think this, and he would always make suggestions. And, he kept saying, it's your film, it's your choice. But am I going to turn down like one of the master storytellers of our time when he makes a suggestion? No, I'd be an idiot.
Well, it's a beautiful film about what will be my new favorite author once I listen to one of his books. But just the language from Bubba Ho-Tep and just that whole story, and how you could take such a ridiculous sounding story and actually make it relevant and heartfelt and have just moments of pathos, and just it's Bubba Ho-Tep. Highly recommend that film. It's a good entryway into Joe Lansdale's work. Hansi Oppenheimer, thank you so much for being on the Film Trip podcast. Your documentary, All Hail the Popcorn King, is coming soon and will be available and in lieu of that, seek out the work of Joe Lansdale. I can't tell you how much I appreciate you doing the show. This has been awesome.
I'm totally flattered because I was reading Film Threat in the 70s and like Joe, John Gore and everything. It's like, oh man, this is the coolest shit.
Well, it doesn't go back that far. It's actually the 80s, but like those, it feels like the 70s. Yeah, it's been around for a long time. But yeah, it's from since the 80s. Yeah, it's crazy. I mean, it's
weird and quirky films, and I love that. That's great.
Yeah, well, the mission has not changed. Here, I've got the same job I had right out of high school. I can't seem to escape Film Threat no matter what I do. Hansi, thanks for doing the Film Threat podcast. This was an absolute blast. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much. My pleasure.